We'd like to thank Mr Fothergill's and Cobra Garden for sponsoring this episode of Pots and Trowels. Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. Today we're going to be planting onion sets in the veg plot, and I'm going to be dividing hostas to get some plants for free. Well, we're going to start in the vegetable garden this week, and this is the onion bed where we grow the garlic and the onions, the spring onions, and later on the season the leeks will go. And we're going to start with onions today. All members of the onion family like a fairly rich, humus-rich soil. So I've already worked in lots of compost that we've made. I'm going to put a bit of fertiliser down because they're also quite greedy and they need lots of nutrients. So you can use anything, grow more or bloodfish and bone. I'm using the dried poultry pellets, which are really good, and they will release their nutrients over several weeks through the growing season. With all fertiliser, a good little tip is always work it into the surface. It needs to be in contact with moist soil, but it also means it won't oxidise, and that's when the nutrients are released and just lost into the atmosphere. We want them to go down into the ground where the roots are going to be. So that's it prepared, simple as that. I'm then going to use my good old faithful planting stick here just to put them in. It's nice and straight as a straight edge, and it basically gives me markers on there so I know what distance I'm planting. So when it comes to planting, there are various ways that you can grow onions. The traditional method is to grow them from seed like this. It's a little bit late for putting them in. You could get away with it now. We're only at the beginning of April, so you could put them in if you want to. They're just going to be a bit later. The other thing you can do now though, of course, is all the lovely salad onions and spring onions. This is the perfect time to put them in all the way through April, May and even June. These grow really quickly and you can pull them when they're young and use them in salads and stir fries and cook with them. So perfect time to put those in now. But what we're going to do today is to plant some onion sets, and this is a really easy way to get onions established. These are basically little baby onions that were started from seed last year by specialist growers. They then keep them in cold stores over winter in exactly the right conditions so that when we plant them out in spring, they will grow away and they will develop into bulbs of about 3-4 inches in diameter. So it's a really good way to grow them. It's that way. And not only have I got this one here, and this is a variety called, I'll just have a look on my bag where I've written it on. This is Centurion, which is an F1 hybrid, a really good one. But then you can get red onions, and this year we're trying this one for the first time. This is a pink onion, so that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. So all I'm going to do is to space them out about 4 to 6 inches apart. They don't need to be too close, so these are 6-inch spacings along here. I'm just going to put them there. Now, some people just push them into the ground and leave them at that, but what can happen is the blackbirds can come along and they just peck them out. So I always use a trowel, and I just make a small indentation with the trowel and put it in so that I'm just about covering the bulb, so only the very tip is visible, and that way it gives them a little bit more support and it makes them more difficult for the blackbirds to pull them out. And what will happen very quickly is from the bottom of that bulb roots will form, and then within a few weeks time we'll have shoots, and then they're off and growing through the rest of the season. One of the great things about growing perennials in the garden is they come back every year and make a lovely clump, and the good thing about that is you can dig them up and divide them and spread them around or give them to friends. It's a little bit late for quite a few perennials because they're now making lots of lush growth, and if you dig them up they'll wilt, but there are still some you can do, the ones that sort of start into growth a little bit later. And a good example is hostas, and hostas, some of them are growing and we've got sort of 2 or 3 inches of growth, and I've got some in the garden of other varieties that have made no growth at all. So I always think now early April is a good time to dig them up and divide them if you need to, and it's worth doing that every sort of 4 or 5 years because like all perennials they tend to grow outwards and you get a bare patch in the middle, a little bit like the top of my head. It's getting a bit thin in the middle now, and we get all that nice new growth around the edge. So by digging them up and splitting them, it rejuvenates them and you get much better growth in the future. So that's what we're going to do with this, and this is, as I say, a perfect time to do it with hostas. The soil's warming up, they want to grow, so they're just going to establish quickly. they're not easy to pull apart by hand. They've got quite tough roots. So I've actually sometimes used a spade and physically chopped them. But what I'm going to do with this clump here is use this. This is a 5-in-1 tool. It can be used for all sorts of things, measuring, cutting, weeding, but it's got a serrated edge on it, and that is great for cutting through tough roots. So all I'm going to do is to get that in there and cut off a decent size. Pull that off like that, and there I've got it. I've got there a nice clump of hosta there. It's got about maybe 10 or a dozen new growths on there, and that is a good size clump to put in. And from this original clump I'll probably get half a dozen or 8 new plants out of it. If you really wanted to get more, what you could do is take off these individual leaf spears here, and if I just take that one off there, you can see that has got a good little root on it already. That will pot up or plant out and grow on, but it's going to be a few years before you get a clump like this. So I'd sooner have a decent sized clump, and then it's just a case of planting them out in the garden. So all we're going to do is now dig out a nice hole for it to go in. I've already prepared the soil, forked it over and got it ready. And then I'm going to use a little trick that my old grandma taught me about 50 years ago when I used to garden with her and we were growing vegetables. It's called puddling, and all you do is to put your plant in the hole, fill it full of water so that you're really soaking that root ball, and it makes a nice muddy solution for the roots to grow into. And then I'm just going to pull the soil back round it. Now it does go sludgy and muddy, so what we can't do is firm it too much at the minute. So I'm going to leave that to settle, and then in a day or so when the water's drained I can firm that in properly, plant a little group there, and we'll have nice hostas that look really good through the summer. So it's a great way to make one big plant into probably 8 new ones. Well, thank you for watching. Hopefully there's been some ideas of things you can get up to in your garden. Please tell all your friends to watch it as well, and feel free to share it. And remember, you can subscribe for free on YouTube. We'll be back later on in the week with even more to do in the garden. See you then. Bye.